It is great to be here in Kenya with education leaders who are worried about foundational learning, even at the end of the day. I have heard this statistic, 90% of children in sub-Saharan Africa, so many times. But I was just complaining to Namgamso. How can it be 90%? How can that possibly be true? I mean, I've lived in this continent for 16 years. I'm married to an African. All my friends, not all my friends, but most of my friends are African. Talented, PhD, skilled. But yet, there's something fundamentally wrong. So I have 3 points for you as we start off. 3 suppositions. Supposition number 1 is that this issue of foundational literacy and numeracy and the low outcomes is a moral problem. It is just, for those of you who are believers of some kind of faith, it is sinful, it is wrong that these kids are going to school and families are investing this much education in, and they don't get the outcomes. It's just wrong. Now, we're talking about sub-Saharan Africa, but those of you who are not sub-Saharan Africa, you cannot escape. The numbers in India are 70%. The numbers in Latin America and Caribbean are lower. But the learning loss was bigger in LAC than any other region. So there are poor families whose kids look like me or look like you who are not getting what they deserve, and their families are not getting what they've signed up for. It's just morally wrong. That's supposition number 1. Number 2 is that the evidence base of how to improve it is substantially better than it ever used to be. There are solutions that you'll hear about from these panelists that work in these contexts to improve learning outcomes. Quickly, I'll say 3 things on that. Number 1, there's a program called structured pedagogy. This is very simple. It's giving a kid a book, giving a teacher a teacher's guide, giving that teacher support, and having them trained in skills-based things. That combination of extremely obvious, very simple things has had many RCTs, including some that I've been involved with, have provided the very interesting idea that if you give a kid a book, a teacher, a teacher's guide, give them some coaching, and train them with some skills, kids will improve. That's point number 1. Point number 2, there's something called teaching at the right level, which is, as we'll hear about in a moment from Botswana, providing them support at the right level will improve learning outcomes. The third thing on this idea that we know more about it is that there is a new panel called the Global Education Evidence Advisory Panel. Very long name. Basic idea is that they have recently upgraded those 2 approaches, structured pedagogy and teaching the right level, to a best buy. That means that not just for FLN, but for the entire sector, using these methods are the 2 of the most cost-effective, 2 of the 3 most cost-effective interventions we know of in the sector. So it's morally wrong. We have an idea of what to do. My third point is it depends on us taking that seriously and doing something about it. I'm not saying that it's magical. Having worked on some of these FLN improvement programs, it is not easy to do, but we are not where we were a little while ago. So if you are a teach for whatever country leader, a researcher, an implementer, there's something you'll hear from this panelist that will give you some nuggets of things you can practically do to apply and improve learning outcomes in the countries and the schools and the kids that you care about. And that's what I'm excited about, to have this panel on board. So let me turn to them now. I want to introduce you to them. They're fantastic, but each of them are getting 1 sentence, just so we can make sure we have time to hear from them. First, we have on this side, this is Joyce Kinyanjui. Wave, Joyce. Joyce, wave, Joyce. Joyce is the technical lead for the Kirinyaga County Literacy Program for ZZ Afrique Foundation. We have Moses Abiero. Moses is the program manager for AFCAN, which is a ECD advocacy group. Thanks, Moses, for joining us. We have Namgamso Satse. She's a researcher at the RICEP group at Stellenbosch University, a very beautiful place in South Africa. We have Tendekai Mukoi. She works for Youth Impact, which is an organization in Botswana, and she's the program manager for teaching at the right level. Thanks so much. Emmanuel Manyasa, he's the executive director for Usawa Agenda in Kenya. And if you watch TV, you've seen him on TV in Kenya. I did it again, didn't I? Okay. I promised I wouldn't do it, but then I did it. So what we're going to do is we're going to hear from these panelists now a little bit about their work.
Ben has spoken about the learning crisis that is there in Africa. We all agree that 90% is a big number. And in Botswana, in response to this, we are implementing teaching at the right level in collaboration with the government of Botswana. Teaching at the right level is a remedial education program that is designed to catch students on that are lagging behind in their basic numeracy and literacy. We assess students first before we work with them. The reason why we do the assessment is for us to be able to see at which level is the child at, because with teaching at the right level, we group students or we implement or we do the intervention according to the need of the child. So if there are students who are lagging in basic operation, which is addition, we group them together, then we do targeted instruction. And what is unique about the program and has been working well is that teaching at the right level is a fun program. There is learner appropriate activities that we do. We do icebreakers with the students. What it has done is that over and above the learning outcomes, we are seeing spillover effects that are coming from the program. As you do icebreakers with the children, you are breaking the ice, you are demystifying the atmosphere between the child and the teacher. The children are able to learn better. And the teachers are also telling us that it has enabled the students to be boosted in confidence. Those who were low performing, those who were not participating in class because of the activities, they are now doing better at that. And we have two delivery models in Botswana. One is the direct delivery, where our youth impact facilitators are the ones implementing, and we use this delivery model to test quite a few things that can be able to help optimize the program. So the second model is the government model, where we have our teachers, we have our youth volunteers that are implementing the program, and this is our scaling model. This is where all the lessons from the direct delivery, we are taking them there so that we can be able to scale a program that remains at quality and that has fidelity as well.
Thanks so much, Tendekai. And I think just to say that from what I understand you're telling us is that this Teaching at the Right Level program has shown impacts, and also it's now being moved to large scale, national scale in Botswana. So that's one model. I would love to hear now from Namgamso. Can you talk about your work over the last few years on a structured pedagogy program in South Africa?
Sure, thanks. I think to quickly premise is that South Africa, in terms of foundation phase learners, 80% of them are in no-fee schools, so typically your disadvantaged areas. So the work that I've been involved from the get-go almost focused at, like, we can't be playing sticks and stones in a corner. Like, the problem is massive. So broadly is trying to say, how do we experiment or think through solutions or programs that can be taken to scale? Ben mentioned earlier on around structured pedagogy, and I suppose the work has really said, okay, we've learned from international research and as well as intra-Saharan African research, and the lesson plan, the coaching, and the training is almost like your basic ingredients. So take that, and let's explore with variations, cost effectiveness, scalability, take up of what that looks like. 3 ways. Take the core, you deploy a coaching. We've seen this in South Africa, there's other examples. Across Africa, I mean, Susome is one of them. Take the core again, model 2, and because we've also got a high unemployment rate in South Africa, so how do you kill 2 birds with 1 stone? You recruit a matriculant, give them high quality training and support with the core. And then the third one is trying to experiment with this idea of scale. Let's take the core and let's play a safety net supporting role to government to implement. Some of the things that have worked, I think again, to repeat, implementation, implementation, implementation. And thinking through how do we get teachers to do more. So if we came in there at level 2, we want to shift them from level 2 to level 6 or level 7 or whatever the case is.
So I'm just wondering, as you're hearing from Namgamso, if there's particular things in your context that make sense to try. I'm hearing her say there's kind of a core that works. What in your context would you play around with? Would it be the additional teaching assistant? Would it be the coaching? Would it be some ed tech? I'm wondering how you think about that. But while you're ruminating on that question, I want to hear from Joyce, because Joyce has an example from here in Kenya that's kind of an interesting mix of this teaching at the right level and structured pedagogy with a different emphasis. Joyce.
Thank you, Ben. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm implementing or supporting or working with government to implement a literacy program. And a few things were running through my mind. We've had Tusome that was implemented for about 6 years. And we've had so many interventions in Kenya. And I kept wondering, do we need another intervention, or should we consolidate what we've learned over the years? Because I am just recently from a senior position in the government, and you know, where I was now coming from CSO to government and back, and the lessons that I learned in both spaces have made me begin to question sometimes how we do our programming, so that you get this teacher, you work with her for 3 years, and then discard everything he or she learned, come with a new program, throw away the tools, throw away the books, start again. And I felt there's no national program, literacy program in Kenya. And in the county where we are working, 40% of the kids can read at the right level, you know, at the required, at grade level. And 40% is not zero. So why don't we come together? Why is this 40%? Move it to 60, to 80, to 100, so that the teachers come, we sit together and co-create our manual, as opposed to sitting in our fancy offices in Nairobi, design a manual, design tools, design and tell the teachers this is what we'll do. And disregarding their prior learning, so that we sit with the teachers, what do you do for kids to learn? You know, what's happening. And we are working with both private and public, so that we get a list of 10 things that all teachers are doing. That goes to our manual. Then it comes to material development. We are not going with prescribed, these are the materials you use. So we sit down, and as teachers, we get 2 days to create materials together, and then you carry them back to school, as opposed to, so it's cost effective, and issues of training and also teaching at the right level. So that's required. But how do you do it without a program? Is why don't we sit, because catch-up or a remediation program should actually be part and parcel of teaching and learning, as opposed to being something separate that you do, you know. So it's taking existing principles and using them with teachers to co-create things.
Excellent. And working closely with government to do that, so that you're actually getting to the change process for individual teachers. Thanks so much, Joyce. We're going to turn next to a very different model from Emmanuel, and please kind of connect, you know, your work to the advocacy side for these kinds of approaches. You've heard 3 so far. Well, where does Usawa Agenda work on this area of improving foundational learning? What's missing from why don't we have more programs that are implementing these sort of approaches in countries?
Ben, as you started earlier, you said there is evidence of what works. But as we all know, data drives narratives. Narratives allocate power and profit. So because they do that, data is contested at all times. So even the evidence that is available is contested. When that evidence is contested, it means it may not be used. And if it is used, sometimes it is not used in the manner that the generators of it thought it would be used. So what we do as Usawa Agenda is to continue to generate evidence, but work with government institutions to try and ensure that our data is not contested. We are generating evidence. We conduct learning assessments nationally, biannually, and we have ensured that they don't doubt it, because we have engaged them in the processes through which we generate data. The National Bureau of Statistics participates in the process. The Ministry of Education participates in the process. The Teacher Service Commission participates. The Curriculum Development team participates, so that they see how we generate the evidence that we have generated. And now, the data we generate is accepted as complementary to official statistics to fill the gaps within the national data on education. So that is one thing that we have done. But we have also realized over the years that evidence by itself does not stir response, does not make people act. So we have engaged with people from the community level to the subnational level, where we have our devolved level of government, to the national level where we have the national government, and try to engage beyond our country through the networks that we belong to, among them PAL network, to which my friend Joyce belongs to as well. And the reason for engaging in those networks is for us to continue learning, because we understand that we have learned something through the work that we do. But what we have is not all there is to be known. And that's why we don't use the term advocacy in our work, because we say when you advocate for something, you claim to have full knowledge and you want the other person to adopt. We don't claim to have full knowledge. So we engage in the expectation that the government people, the communities we are working with, have something else to offer us that we'll also learn in the process of doing what we are doing. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Manu. I think that power, you can see your organization in one of these four. What's the right role? You won't use the word advocacy because Manuel doesn't like it, but how do you get the data onto the front so that the reason why he's on television is because he's using that data that he's fought for. Are you doing it at the county level, actually working closely with government? Are you doing it through these technical approaches we've heard about? Now I want Moses to tell us about how this works in the pre-primary sector. So Moses' AFCAN is working in the pre-primary sector. How do you see the FLN relationship overlapping with what you're working on in early childhood?
So I think for me, early childhood is the foundation for learning. And basically, it is one of the sectors that is neglected in terms of investment. But just drawing back to research that was done by Heckman that proved that investment in early childhood has got better outcomes in terms of human capital. So what we do is that we provide a platform for collaboration and partnership, both at regional and national level. At regional level, we work closely with the Africa Union through the AECD cluster, which brings together different partners, member states, development partners, private sector, service providers, so that then we can be able to share evidence, we can be able to share what works across the continent, so that then it can be able to improve in terms of accelerating better ECD outcomes across the continent. But also at the national level, we bring together different actors to form what is known as the National Early Childhood Development Networks. And these networks engage with partners at that level to ensure that if there is evidence, this evidence is taken up in terms of improving practice. And that can also accelerate in terms of realizing better outcomes for children at that level, including ensuring that while assessing literacy and numeracy at that level, then what is emphasized is school readiness, emergent literacy and emergent numeracy. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Moses. Okay, so five very different examples for how you could think about improving foundational literacy and numeracy. We're going to transition now. I want each of these panelists to tell me in one word. Everyone say the word one. One. All five of you say one. In one word, tell me what your organization's facing as the biggest challenge that makes foundational literacy and numeracy outcomes difficult to achieve. And we'll start. Joyce, you get to start this time. One word.
Uptake.
Think evidence.
Which is the one word?
Evidence.
Sustainability.
Quality.
Injustices.
Injustices. You changed from last time. Now it's one word. Injustices. Okay. So I'm not sure what your organization is feeling as the biggest challenge, but I want us to address some of these. Uptake. If I was a panelist, that's the one I would have said, is that uptake is fundamentally difficult. Can you talk a little bit about both how this approach in Kirinyaga is working to increase uptake? As an aside, I used to work with an organization called RTI that had many large-scale literacy programs happening at the same time. And there was one in Malawi and Kenya and Tanzania, for example. The biggest difference between the programs was not whether or not they have all of Namgamso's coaching and materials and training. The biggest difference was uptake. One of them had 85% uptake, one of them had 22% uptake. The biggest difference to program impact was uptake. Can you tell me how you get uptake in yours?
The challenges of uptake is brought by apathy, by the teachers. Remember, we've taken them through so much. They've gone through 10 programs. So you appear and they're like, just another one is here. So they're sort of tired. And so I think this time for uptake, we are asking them to tell us, to actually design the program themselves. And then secondly, with regards to uptake attitude, actually of teachers towards whether foundational learning, their beliefs, whether kids can learn. I think that's a challenge. So we must keep addressing their attitude towards not just the program, but towards learning. I think they feel their work is not that important. I think they don't get it, how important that level is. You can miss school or not, you can play the whole day. And I think just changing that mindset is quite important. And that goes the same to the government. You take the best teachers in upper to raise the mean score for end of cycle exams. And you take the teachers who, there's nothing wrong with being old, but you know, people who are thinking of retiring, etc. So attitudes and asking this time differently, ask the teachers to tell us. Let them reflect on what they've learned over the years. But once you appear, oh, there's this program, I want us to do this, they're tired.
I really reflect on what you said, Joyce, about teachers' perceptions of what children can do. There was a study that we did that asked teachers, at what grade should a child be able to read and comprehend? And at the beginning of the program, the average was grade 3, which means if you have some grade 1s in the average, you also have some grade 5s. So there's a percentage of teachers who their whole career assume that children can only read in grade 5. And one of the beauties of uptake-focused programs is as teachers are actually implementing quite quickly, they start to see some quick effects. And those same teachers assessed 2 years later that grade 3 on average had gone down to grade 1.5 between there because they saw differences. So this speaks to what I heard from you as your word, which is sustainability. And talk a little bit about your work and how you're thinking about the importance of sustainability, maybe how it connects to Joyce's issue of working at the government level. How do we get sustainability for these sort of literacy and numeracy programs?
We were intentional about designing a program from scale, right? So we knew that from get-go. So I would say, one, you know, look at things, do that intentionally from the get-go. And not to say that there's no space or room for interventions that do want to work in 20 schools for 20 years. Not at all saying that's not okay, but being very clear on where you want to take the program and design for that purpose. The second one is, again, thinking around sustainability. For scale is cost, is a huge one. You know, we've had many iterations of programs that almost 3 times the amount that government spends per learner per year. So if we had to go back and rethink, you know, if we're talking about scale, is this cost effective? Is it feasible for government to take up our program, you know, to scale? And I think the third one is around this concept of, for scale, thinking through what is easily integrated within the system. I think the biggest mistake that we've done as civil society is like we create these Rolls-Royce programs that basically just create parallel education systems. So I think saying, okay, we envision for this program to be one day to be adopted. What is the current status quo or context of within the education system itself, and what best or program best that can easily, as simple as possible, can fit into that system.
Excellent. And I'm going to turn next to Tendekai in the Botswana case to talk a little bit about how this issue of cost and effectiveness is playing out as you scale up. I just wanted to make the push that maybe many of you are thinking, that cost effectiveness is a big thing that the sector struggles in. We haven't done enough. But just being cheap is not the same as cost effective. Because you can have a very inexpensive program with no impact. The question is, how do you reduce cost to maintain impact to get marginal cost effectiveness? So that small detail, can you figure out for us, Tendekai, how to get cost effective programs at scale? Thanks.
First of all, teaching at the right level is a cost-effective program. It doesn't require a lot of resources for you to be able to do it. So in Botswana, as we are scaling the program, we are implementing what we call A/B testing, that is rapid impact assessment tests, that are helping us to optimize the program, to see what can be done to the program or changes that can be done that will impact on the delivery, that will impact on the learning outcomes. So when we talk about these changes, we are not talking about changes that are huge. In a classroom setting, what can you tweak? It doesn't need money for you to tweak. For example, already in TAL, we are saying you are grouping students by ability, but what else can you do within that class? You can even do a subgrouping of saying, if we put boys alone and girls alone, would they learn better? Because at times girls, when it comes to maths, they are shy when boys are around. If we mix them up, does that make a difference? So already you're optimizing the program without adding any cost to it, and it's able to be scalable. We really want to have a program that is scalable. Governments do not have a lot of resources. So if you bring in a program that expects the government to provide a lot of funding, it might not work. You need a program that even the teachers, when you give it to them, this is the lesson plan. It doesn't have to be a 2-page lesson plan. How can you optimize it? How can you reduce it and still be meaningful? So these are some of the things that we look at when we do our A/B testing, when we're working with the government. And one thing that is important to us is data. Data speaks volumes. Data really has increased uptake. In Botswana, we don't have a challenge of uptake of the program. The government is excited. We have shown them the results. They've seen what works. The challenge that we have now is how do we continue to scale? Because we are in 8 out of the 10 regions now. How do we continue to scale the program, still being cost effective, still being impactful, and the teachers are the ones implementing. Are they not going to fall back when they go to their regions and do the norm where they're just teaching without fun and engaging activities? How do we even get them to implement in the first place? What tools can we give them that we can be able to track and so on?
Thanks so much. I actually have a follow-up question for you. I want you to give a couple more examples of what an A/B test might look like. Now, I'm working at the Gates Foundation, and we love funding RCTs. I have set up some RCTs myself. I think they're a really important part of the work, and I don't want anyone in the room to say anything bad about RCTs. However, there is a very different role for A/B tests that I think are really important for implementers, for all leaders to think about. Give a couple examples of A/B tests. You said maybe mixed gender classrooms or gender-only classrooms. What are some of the ones that Youth Impact is considering?
Yes, another one is mixed ability, subgrouping. You have students in a class that have mixed ability. It might be an addition class, but within the addition class, some are able to do number recognition, 1 number recognition, 2 numbers. So you can either mix it up, a high performer and a low performer, so that they can help each other, or you can group according to those who are in the same level so that they can be able to support each other and all. But one other A/B testing that we are currently doing and is really exciting for us is the structured coaching tool, where we are providing our mentors. At Youth Impact, mentors are the ones who go around the classes observing facilitators and giving them feedback afterwards so that they can be able to improve their facilitation, and it trickles down to the learning outcomes. So we are providing a checklist where it provides them with different categories of what to look at in a class. For example, is the class engaging? Is it child-centered? Is the targeted instruction going on there? So when we talk about A/B testing, there are 2 treatment arms. There is no control arm in an A/B test. Everyone is receiving something, but when it comes to the coaching list, maybe it's only half of them receiving it and the others are not. So there's no one who's really disadvantaged, and it's really rapid. Every term we have this test and we are getting results, and it helps us with decision making as well.
Thanks so much. So I'm wondering if Emmanuel on the end is hearing about this county level work that Joyce is doing, this work in South Africa at the province level, and then now in Botswana. And maybe you're saying, I remember your word was injustice. Your one word was injustice. What are the things you worry about when you hear about these very good programs? What are the things that you worry about that you want to make sure that governments do, and as well as the implementers in the room are thinking about?
The one thing that I worry about most is the fact that we are doing all these good things which are necessary right now to address the challenges that the current children are facing. But we are not trying to go down to the substratum. Why in the first place did we have so many children attend school and not get to learn? So if we don't address that challenge, then we are swimming in a pond. Yeah? Our boundaries are delimited. So what we can achieve with the work we are doing is within that pond. We will not be able to go beyond. And I feel that for the long term, so that we avoid a situation where we are creating an industry of interventions that will run for 100 years to come, because the world should be here 100 years to come and education should be here. We need to go back and ask, what are the foundations of our education systems? Are they elite enterprises designed for elite reproduction? If that is what they are, because that is what we think they are, then we need to go back there and ask, how do we conceive education as societies? And what is it for? And how do we make sure that everyone is playing their respective role to make sure that education works for every child? Because education is necessary. Foundational literacy is absolutely necessary. If you are not able to read, what you can learn is so limited, because you can only learn from those who can speak to you. You can learn from those who existed before you, and you can learn from those who are far removed from you in space. So you have to read. But how do we make sure that we are designing systems that will make a child with disabilities read? How do we make sure that we are redesigning our education system to make sure that every child is going to school in the first place? Because we still have a lot of children out of school, and we have made children to belong to parents, which is a big mistake. Because here in Africa especially, we have parents who don't care whether a child goes to school. So if you let the child belong to the parent, that child is doomed from day one. They won't go to school because the parent doesn't care and maybe doesn't even want that child to attend school. We need to redesign the education systems. For me, they are unjust as designed.
Elite reproduction. That's what I heard you say. And I wonder, one of the things we can think about for reducing the elite reproduction is what is happening in grade 1. A lot of foundational literacy and numeracy are including grade 1 to 3 as a cycle. I think your work is grade 1 to 3 or grade 1 and 2. But my worry is this issue called the Matthew effect. Anyone ever heard of the Matthew effect? No? Okay, either you don't read the Bible or you don't know education. It's one of the two. I know there's many religions in the room that might know that this idea of the Matthew effect comes from a verse in the Bible that basically says, some get a lot, some who have a lot get more, and some who don't have, even what they have is taken away from you. And that has become an idea in the education circle called the Matthew effect, which is very simple, that if you start grade 1 behind, you will always be behind. Give me a second on the US. In the US, there was a moment where the best way to determine whether or not there was need for more prisons in an area was based on second grade reading scores. If children don't have these basic skills, they are going to struggle not just in grade 3, not just in grade 5, all the way through the system. So one of the things I have as an interest is what are we doing in grade 1? Because maybe it's some of the solution to Emmanuel's problem, and maybe we would not even need teaching in the right level in grade 3 to 5 if we sorted out grade 1 so that every child enters and leaves grade 1 with these basic skills, as opposed to dramatic differentiation within classrooms where people's overall education futures depends on how well they did in grade 1. That said, I know Moses would tell us the issue is not grade 1, the issue is before grade 1. So can you talk to us a little bit about where you see the core issue and how we can improve and reduce this Matthew effect?
Yeah, thank you. I think for me is the way colleagues have indicated that we need to look at our education system and where we invest. We can invest across levels, but also not forgetting ECD, because that is where the foundation is. So for me is how do we ensure that there is readiness, one, environment readiness for the child, and the child ready for school. So that is very key. In terms of one, investment in the environment, in terms of teaching learning resources, in terms of professionalization of teachers, in terms of motivation, because that is where, especially across the region, we have challenge, in terms of teacher remuneration, teacher motivation, teacher training, and professional development at that level. So that is very, very important in terms of building the foundational stone for better human capital outcomes, especially around better education outcomes. So what do we need to do? One, invest in early childhood development system, in better curriculum, better teachers, better teaching learning resources, better standards in terms of assessment, and also teacher capacity building, continuous teacher capacity building, continuous coaching, continuous mentorship, so that then we can be able to build that foundation. And I like what our colleague talked about, number recognition and number value. It starts from that basic in terms of sorting and grouping, and also in terms of matching and pairing, provides this foundation. When we talked about, sorry, just 1 minute. Yeah, thank you. Last. So when we talk about reading, when a child is able to read a picture, that is key to building literacy skills. So at home, how can we be able to prepare parents so that they can be able to help and support children at that level? Thank you.
We've heard from Botswana, Tendekai, on how exactly it is to scale up inside of it, almost an entire country. We've heard the plea of Emmanuel of let's change these systems and let's give the data to the community so they know how to respond. We've heard from Moses about the importance of international scale advocacy, but also getting down to the relationship between school readiness and primary. And we've heard Joyce talk about how do you bring in government at the core to make it easier for the individual teacher to buy in.